I'll take you back to when it all seemed normal, when life felt like we were just another regular couple. We'd been married for 3 years, and things were fine, I guess. A lot of moments blurred together, like our first vacation to that crappy seaside motel, or buying our house, which we thought would be our forever home. She and I had our routines, our morning coffees, our random conversations about work or what to do on weekends. We felt like we knew each other, even if maybe, deep down, there were things we didn't want to see. There was always this thing hanging over us, though, kids. Or more specifically, the topic of having kids. Whenever it came up, I shut it down. And not just because I wasn't ready, but because I couldn't. She didn't know that, though. I never told her. Right after I turned 18, I made a decision that changed everything. I got a vasectomy. Call it teenage rebellion or whatever. But I swore I'd never bring a kid into this world to repeat the nightmare that was my own upbringing. I'd seen enough to make me swear off fatherhood for life. So, throughout our marriage, anytime she hinted at wanting kids, I'd deflect. Not yet, babe. Or let's focus on our careers first. There was always an excuse lined up. She complained now and then, sure. But she seemed to let it go, at least for the time being. I guess I got good at dodging the conversation, until one night when the bomb dropped. We were having one of those quiet dinners at home. You know the type? Nothing special, just the two of us. Out of the blue, she looks at me, all dreamy-eyed and beaming, and says, "I'm pregnant." Just like that. No warning, no lead-up. She was waiting for me to react like it was the best news I'd ever heard. And I guess it should have been, if things were normal. But they weren't. The second she said it, my mind went blank. And then it hit me like a freight train. I knew for a fact that kid couldn't be mine. Now, let me tell you, it's one thing to suspect your wife is cheating, but it's another to have it practically thrown in your face like that. I try to play it cool, faking a smile, nodding, all while I felt like the floor was crumbling beneath me. She went on about how she couldn't wait for us to be a family, gushing about baby names and planning our bright future. And all I could do was sit there, feeling like a total idiot, trapped in my own house. I had to swallow this wave of rage, confusion, and this weird hollow feeling in my chest that I couldn't shake. But after that night, I started noticing things that hadn't stood out before. How she always kept her phone face down on the table. How she was suddenly getting texts late at night and brushing them off as work-related. How she seemed way too interested in going out with the girls and then coming back smelling like a damn nightclub. I knew I had to find out who this other guy was or if I was just being paranoid. And that paranoia, man, it gets to you. You start overthinking every single detail, every word, every move they make. So I became, let's call it, vigilant. When she wasn't looking, I'd grab her phone and skim through her messages. She had a passcode, which was already weird because we used to share everything. But one night, when she was in the shower, I finally figured it out. Our wedding anniversary, how cliché. I started scrolling like my life depended on it. Nothing obvious, at least. Just random texts from numbers I didn't recognize, but they seemed harmless at first. Maybe I was just reading into it too much. I felt like a damn detective in a movie, and trust me, it's not as fun as it sounds. The more I dug, the more my stomach twisted with this nagging feeling that I was about to find something I didn't want to see. She acted normal around our friends, so much that I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd imagined it all. She was her usual self, making jokes, holding my hand, laughing at stupid TV shows with me like everything was fine. But to me, every laugh felt fake. Every touch felt forced. I couldn't even look at her without questioning everything we had shared up until that point. When she wasn't home, I'd search through her stuff, the closet, the drawers, her laptop, looking for anything that could explain what the hell was going on. I knew it was crazy, and trust me, part of me hated myself for doing it, but I felt like I was losing my mind. All the while, she was prancing around, playing the role of the loving wife, completely oblivious to the fact that I was piecing together this twisted puzzle. Or maybe she knew. Maybe she didn't care. And then there were the phone calls. Random ones at odd hours. One she'd step out of the room to answer, speaking in hushed tones like she didn't want me to hear. Every time that happened, I felt my blood boil. I thought about confronting her right then and there, grabbing the phone, demanding answers, but I couldn't. I didn't have proof, just a gut feeling that something was terribly wrong. That sense of betrayal gnawed at me day in and day out, and no matter how much I tried to act normal, I could feel the tension between us growing thicker. It all came to a head one night when she was asleep, and I was lying there wide awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine, but I also wasn't ready to face whatever truth was waiting for me. So I did the only thing I could. I kept watching, kept listening, kept waiting for that one slip-up that would confirm everything or maybe, just maybe, prove me wrong. But I wasn't wrong. Deep down, I already knew it. The storm was coming, and I wasn't sure either of us would survive it. So, after days of trying to act like I wasn't losing my damn mind, I finally decided to confront her. I mean, I couldn't keep living in this twisted game of charades, pretending that everything was sunshine and rainbows when I was drowning in doubt and anger. I needed answers. No more dodging, no more tiptoeing around. Just the truth, whatever the hell that might be. It was late one night, and I could hear her in the kitchen, humming some tune as she cleaned up the dishes. I walked in, heart pounding, trying to play it cool, but I'm sure my face betrayed me. She turned to me with that smile of hers, the smile that used to light up my world, but now just felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "Hey babe, what's up?" she asked like it was any other night. And there I was, about to drop a bomb that would change everything. I tried to ease into it, asking her how she was feeling about the pregnancy, whether she'd thought about seeing a doctor, what her plans were, trying to keep it all casual. She seemed so damn relaxed, going on about how excited she was for us to start this new chapter together. She talked about baby names, what the nursery might look like, even bringing up family traditions she couldn't wait to start. It was like she was living in some kind of fairy tale, completely ignoring the tension radiating off me. But I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't play the loving husband when every word she said just pissed me off more. Finally, I took a deep breath and asked her straight out, "Are you sure? Are you really sure that this is our baby?" She stopped mid-sentence and just stared at me. Confusion, anger, maybe even a bit of fear. I couldn't tell. "What do you mean? Of course, it's ours. Why are you even asking me that?" Her voice was sharp, defensive, and I could see she was already gearing up for a fight. "I need to know if there's someone else," I said. The words felt heavy, like I was dragging them out of a deep pit in my chest. I was trying to keep calm, trying not to sound like I was accusing her, but let's be honest, I was, and I knew that she knew it too. Her reaction was instant. "How could you say that?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "You think I would cheat on you? That I would just sleep around and get knocked up by some random guy? You think that little of me?" Tears were already welling up in her eyes, and she slammed the dishcloth down on the counter, hands shaking with rage. "I don't know what to think anymore," I shot back, feeling my own voice rising. "None of this makes any sense. You can't just expect me to take this on faith when I know damn well that I can't have kids." And that was it. The point of no return. I couldn't keep it in anymore. I had to say it. I got a vasectomy. Years ago. Before we even met. And I know that means this kid, it's not mine. You ever watch someone's world crumble in real time? That's what I saw right then. She just stood there, frozen, like I'd slapped her across the face. The silence was suffocating. And for a moment, I thought maybe she was going to deny it all, try to come up with some elaborate lie to cover her tracks. But instead, she just broke. She sank to the floor, sobbing, pulling at her hair like she was trying to rip the truth right out of herself. You lied to me," she choked out between sobs. "You took that choice away from me. You never told me, not once. How could you do that? You knew I wanted a family. You knew I wanted kids, and you lied." And for a moment, I almost felt like the bad guy, like I was the one who'd done her wrong. But then I remembered, she was the one pregnant with another man's child. So I didn't let up. "You had a choice, all right. And you made it, didn't you? Just once, huh? That's all it took." I was yelling now, barely holding back my anger. And that's when she finally admitted it. "It was one time," she screamed back at me, still on the floor, tears streaming down her face. "One mistake, one stupid night, and I didn't think this would happen. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I felt like I was going to be sick. All the suspicions, all the nights lying awake, all the paranoia, it was real. She'd slept with someone else, and now she was carrying his kid. My stomach twisted in ways I didn't think were possible, like I was going to vomit out all the betrayal that had been festering inside me. One time, I scoffed. One time, and you just happened to get pregnant? And you thought what, exactly? That I'd never find out? That I'd just play daddy to some random guy's kid and never question it? I couldn't look at her. All I saw when I looked at her was someone I didn't know, a stranger wearing my wife's face. She just kept crying, muttering apologies that didn't mean a damn thing to me. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know what to do. I was scared, okay? She blubbered. But there was no taking any of it back. I was done. Done with the lies, the secrets, the pretending that we were ever happy. That's it, I said, my voice flat, drained of all the emotion that had been tearing me up inside. I can't do this. I'm filing for divorce. And with that, I turned and walked out, not looking back. I could hear her crying, calling after me, begging me to come back, to talk, to fix things. But there was nothing left to fix. She broke us. And now, all I could do was leave the pieces behind. I got in the car, slammed the door shut, and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't know where I was going, didn't know what I was supposed to do next. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in that house, couldn't be anywhere near her. It felt like my entire world had just shattered, and I had no idea how to put it back together. And that was the moment it all ended. The life we had, the marriage we built, the dreams we shared, it was all gone. I was just a guy sitting in his car, staring out at the empty road ahead, with no clue where it was going to take me. You never really think about what happens after the explosion, you know? I mean, when you're in the thick of it, when you're hurling accusations, slamming doors, leaving your whole life behind, you don't stop to think about what comes next. You're just running on adrenaline and hurt and rage. But once the dust settles and you're left with nothing but silence, well, that's when it hits you. That's when you realize that you have to figure out how to start over, how to rebuild a life from the wreckage. After I walked out that night, I didn't have a plan. I crashed at a buddy's place for a while. One of those friends who says mi casa es tu casa but never really expects you to take them up on it. Eventually, I knew I had to find my own place, a space that didn't reek of pity or shared memories with her. So, I got a crappy one-bedroom apartment across town. It wasn't much, white walls, creaky floors, the kind of place where the neighbors don't bother with hellos. But it was mine, and it was the one place where I didn't have to see her face, didn't have to deal with the ghost of our life together. I wish I could say the move gave me some kind of peace, some closure. But the truth is, it was hell. Every morning, I woke up with this emptiness gnawing at me, this pit in my stomach that never seemed to go away. I couldn't even look at my own reflection without feeling like a total failure, a guy who couldn't keep his marriage together, who let himself get blindsided. And then there was the anger, that unrelenting, festering anger toward her, toward myself, toward everything. I couldn't get rid of it. It hung over me like a dark cloud, dragging me down every damn day. And let's talk about guilt for a second. You'd think it'd all be on her. After all, she's the one who cheated, who lied, who turned our lives into some twisted mess. But there was a part of me that felt guilty too. Guilty for not telling her about the vasectomy sooner. I kept thinking, if I'd told her from the start, maybe none of this would have happened. Maybe she wouldn't have felt betrayed by my secret. And maybe I wouldn't have been left picking up the pieces of a life that wasn't mine anymore. It didn't help that every little thing reminded me of her, of us. I'd be making breakfast and remember how she used to make pancakes on Sundays, pretending she didn't burn half of them. Or I'd be in bed, staring at the ceiling, and the loneliness would crash over me like a wave, pulling me down into memories of how we used to talk late into the night about everything and nothing. Even the dumbest things, like catching a glimpse of her favorite movie on TV, would send me spiraling back into this mess of regret and what-ifs. I tried going back to work, throwing myself into my job, hoping it'd help me move on. But I couldn't focus. Every email, every meeting, every project just felt pointless. How could I care about work when my whole life was falling apart? I'd stare at my computer screen, barely processing the words in front of me, and end up scrolling through old photos on my phone like some masochist, torturing myself with all the smiles and happy moments that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. Then there were the friends, the ones who tried to be there for me, even when they had no idea how to help. They'd text me, check in, invite me out for beers or to watch a game, trying to get me out of the pit I was stuck in. And for a while, I went along with it, plastering on this fake smile and pretending to have a good time. But the more I hung out with them, the more I realized that they couldn't understand what I was going through. How could they? They were happily married, or single, and living their best lives, not dealing with a wife who'd blindsided them with infidelity and a kid that wasn't theirs. And don't even get me started on the friends we'd shared as a couple. People who knew both of us, who had seen us at our best and worst. Most of them sided with her, of course, or at least they did not side with her. They'd send me texts like, "Sorry to hear about what happened," or "Hope you're holding up okay," but it all felt so empty, so meaningless. And to be honest, I couldn't stand the thought of seeing them again, knowing they'd look at me with those eyes full of pity and awkwardness, knowing that they were probably just as clueless as I'd been. So, I cut ties. I let myself drift away from those mutual friendships, the people who were too close to her, too close to what we had been. It felt like cutting off parts of myself, parts of my past, but it was the only way I could start to move forward. Or at least, try to. Nights were the worst, though. That's when everything seemed to come crashing down, when the silence of that apartment felt suffocating, like it was closing in on me. I'd pour myself a drink, or two, or three, hoping to drown out the thoughts, hoping to forget for just a little while. But it never really worked. The numbness would fade, and then I'd be right back where I started, staring at the ceiling, going over every fight, every lie, every missed sign that should have told me she was cheating. Wondering when exactly things went wrong and if there was ever a chance to stop it. Eventually, I tried to get back into some of my old hobbies, playing guitar, going for runs, things I used to love before everything fell apart. But nothing felt the same. It was like the joy had been sucked out of everything I used to enjoy, and all I was left with was this constant feeling of what's the point? I felt like I was just going through the motions, trying to find some semblance of normalcy in a life that had lost all its meaning. I remember one day sitting in a park just watching people go by, families with kids, couples holding hands, friends laughing, and feeling like I was watching it all from the outside, like I was some kind of ghost in my own life. I wanted to be happy, to feel normal, to be able to look at the world without feeling this constant ache. But I couldn't. All I could think about was how everything I thought I knew was gone, and I had no idea who I was supposed to be anymore. And then there was trust, or lack of it. Every time I thought about meeting someone new, trying to put myself out there, it felt impossible. How could I ever trust anyone again? How could I ever open myself up to that kind of hurt? I'd given my all to my marriage, and look where that got me. It felt like no matter how much time passed, I'd never be able to let my guard down, never be able to believe in anything good without expecting it to blow up in my face. But I guess that's what happens after you've been burned. You start seeing shadows where there aren't any, expecting every smile to come with a hidden agenda, every touch to be laced with betrayal. And I hated that. I hated feeling like a bitter, paranoid mess who couldn't even look at the world without assuming the worst. But what choice did I have? After everything that had happened, after all the lies and the hurt, what choice did I have? And so, that was my life after the divorce. A constant battle between trying to move on and being pulled back into the darkness, trying to find pieces of myself that weren't tainted by her betrayal. Some days were better than others, sure. But most days, I was just existing, trying to figure out who I was without her, trying to find a way to live with the scars she'd left behind. Months passed, and the chaos in my head started to calm down, at least a little. Time has a way of dulling even the deepest pain, and it felt like I was coming up for air after being underwater for way too long. I wasn't over it, not by a long shot, but the world didn't feel so suffocating anymore. I started going out again, reconnecting with the parts of life I'd shoved to the back of my mind. It was a slow process, cautious steps back into the world of the living. One night, after work, I ended up at this bar, just a little place down the street from my apartment. A dim, half-empty dive with worn wooden tables and a jukebox that played more static than music. It wasn't much, but it felt right. Comfortable. A place where I could sit alone with my drink and not feel like everyone was watching me, judging me for the wreck I'd become. I sat there nursing a beer, staring blankly at the TV in the corner, pretending to care about some baseball game I couldn't give a damn about when she walked in. She caught my eye, not because she was stunning or anything cliché like that, but because she seemed real. Just a woman, out on her own, looking for the same escape I was. She took a seat a couple of stools down from me, and we exchanged a nod. That's it, just a nod. But something about it felt like the most human connection I'd had in months. I don't even remember how the conversation started. Something stupid, probably the weather, the band playing in the background, the crappy beer selection. But somehow, we were talking, and it wasn't forced. It wasn't like all those conversations I'd had to sit through with people who knew what I was going through and tried to fix me with their pity. She didn't know my story, and I didn't know hers, and that was the best part. There was no baggage, no expectations, just two people talking about life, music, and whatever else popped into our heads. Her name was Allison. She had this warm laugh, the kind that made you want to laugh with her even when you didn't know what was so funny. And for the first time in a long time, I found myself laughing too. Not that fake laugh I've been forcing with my friends to make them feel like I was okay, but a real, genuine laugh. And damn, did it feel good. One beer turned into two, and two turned into three. I wasn't planning on getting drunk, and I didn't, but I let myself relax for the first time since my world fell apart. We stayed until closing, talking about everything and nothing. And when we finally walked out of the bar, I felt lighter. Like I'd left some of my anger, my pain, back there on that bar stool. We exchanged numbers that night, and for the first time, I didn't second-guess it. I didn't worry about where it might lead or what it might mean. I just knew that I wanted to see her again, to talk to her again, to feel that connection that had been missing from my life for so long. The next few weeks were a blur of cautious first steps. Coffee dates, walks through the park, dinners at little hole-in-the-wall restaurants that felt intimate without feeling like a thing. We kept it light. No heavy talks about the past, no digging into each other's skeletons. And honestly, that was perfect for me. I was still too raw, too scared to open up about what I'd been through. And she seemed content to just be. No pressure, no expectations. I remember one night, we were sitting on a bench overlooking the city. The lights were twinkling below us, and we were just sitting there, talking about nothing in particular, when she reached out and took my hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt like a big deal. Like maybe, just maybe, I could trust again. Maybe I didn't have to be so afraid of getting hurt. But that fear was always there, lurking in the back of my mind like some shadow I couldn't shake. The vasectomy. That damn vasectomy. It was like this invisible barrier between me and anything real, anything lasting. Because no matter how good things felt with Allison, no matter how much I wanted to just live in the moment, I knew that eventually I'd have to tell her. I'd have to say the words that had ruined my marriage, and I couldn't help but wonder if it would ruin this too. Every time we got close, every time we shared a laugh or a kiss or one of those quiet moments where nothing needed to be said, I'd feel that fear creep back in. What if she wants kids? What if this is a deal breaker? What if she looks at me the way my ex did? The way she had when I told her the truth. Like I was a liar, a thief who'd stolen her chance at a family. And yet, despite all that, I found myself opening up to Allison more and more. Little by little, I let her into my world, the parts of me I'd kept hidden for so long. She'd ask about my day, my work, my life, and I'd find myself talking about things I hadn't told anyone since the divorce. She'd listen, really listen, and never once did she push me to say more than I was ready to. It was like she got it, like she understood that I was still trying to figure out who I was still trying to rebuild from the rubble. We'd go for long walks, just talking about the most random things, our favorite movies, the worst jobs we'd ever had, what we'd do if we won the lottery. And as we walked, hand in hand, I started to see the future in a way I hadn't in a long time. Not some bleak, hopeless future where I was alone and bitter, but one that actually had some light in it, some color. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I had a shot at happiness again. But still, there was that damn secret. Every day that passed without telling her felt like I was building a lie between us, brick by brick. And I hated it. I hated that I was keeping something so big from her, something that could change everything. But how could I tell her? How could I risk losing the one good thing that had come out of all this mess? One night, after dinner, we were sitting on my couch, wrapped up in each other, And I looked at her, really looked at her. And for a moment, I thought, maybe it won't matter. Maybe she won't care. But then the fear kicked in, that voice in my head screaming at me to keep quiet, to keep things the way they were for just a little longer. Because once the truth was out, there'd be no going back. No pretending. No more safe little bubble where I could just enjoy being with her. So I kept quiet. I kept pushing it off, telling myself that I'd tell her tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that. And in the meantime, we just kept building this thing between us, this fragile, beautiful thing that felt like it could actually be something real. I knew I couldn't keep the truth from her forever. I knew that someday soon, I'd have to face it, to face her, and find out if this was the beginning of something good or just another chapter in the story of my screwed-up life. But for now, I just let myself be happy. For now, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. I knew I couldn't keep dodging the truth forever. It was eating me alive, that secret, clawing at the back of my mind every time I looked at Allison, every time we laughed, held hands, kissed. The longer I put off telling her about the vasectomy, the worse it felt, like I was building this whole relationship on a lie. I'd been carrying the weight of it around for months, feeling like a fraud, and I couldn't stand it anymore. It was time to tell her. It had to be now before I lost my nerve. So one Friday night, I planned a special dinner. Nothing fancy, just my best attempt at cooking something that wouldn't burn or come out of a takeout box. I set the table, lit a couple of candles, and tried to make it look like I wasn't on the verge of a panic attack. I must have adjusted those damn forks a dozen times, just to have something to do with my hands, just to keep my mind off what I was about to tell her. Allison arrived, smiling as always, and I forced myself to smile back. She noticed right away that something was up. She always could read me like a book. "You okay?" she asked, giving me this searching look, trying to figure out what was going on. I told her I was fine, just that I wanted to make tonight special, that there was something we needed to talk about. She looked a little nervous, but didn't push it. She trusted me, and that almost made it harder to do what I was about to do. Dinner was a blur. I couldn't tell you what we ate, what we talked about, anything. I was too wrapped up in my own head, rehearsing what I was going to say, trying to figure out how to break it to her without screwing everything up. But eventually, I couldn't stall any longer. We'd finished eating, and the silence between us felt heavy, filled with everything I hadn't said yet. "I need to tell you something." I finally managed, my voice barely steady. I could see the concern in her eyes, the way she tensed up, bracing herself for whatever was coming. "And it's not easy for me to talk about, but you deserve to know the truth." I told her everything. About the vasectomy I'd had when I was just 18, how it seemed like the only way to break free from the mess of my childhood. How it was a decision I'd made out of fear and anger and a desperate need to control my future. I told her about my marriage, how I'd hidden the truth from my ex, how that secret had destroyed us. And I told her how terrified I was to tell her, afraid that she'd see me differently, that she'd feel betrayed, that she'd leave like my ex-wife had. The whole time, Allison didn't say a word. She just sat there listening, her eyes locked on mine, and I couldn't read her expression. I had no idea what she was thinking, and that scared me more than anything. When I finally finished, I felt like I just ripped my chest open and laid everything bare, vulnerable and raw, and waiting for her to tear me apart. But she didn't. Instead, she reached out and took my hand, squeezing it gently, and that small gesture damn near broke me. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly, her voice calm, steady. "I know that wasn't easy for you." I didn't know what to say. Part of me was still bracing for the backlash, for her to pull away, to say this was a deal breaker. But then she smiled, this soft, reassuring smile that felt like coming home, and said, "It doesn't change anything. I care about you, and I want to be with you. I always dreamed of having a family, sure, but that doesn't have to mean biological kids. There are other ways, adoption, fostering, or maybe it's just the two of us. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." It was like this huge weight lifted off my shoulders. All the fear and insecurity I'd been carrying for so long finally melting away. I felt this overwhelming sense of relief, this rush of gratitude for her understanding, her openness, her ability to see me for who I was and not just the sum of my past mistakes. I pulled her close, held her tight, And for the first time in years, I felt like everything was going to be okay. From that night on, things were different between us, better, deeper. There were no more secrets, no more walls between us. We started talking about our future, about what we wanted our lives to look like. We talked about adoption, about traveling the world together, about building our own traditions, our own family, whatever that might mean. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Real, honest-to-God hope for the future. We moved in together a few months later, and life started to take on a new rhythm, a rhythm that wasn't dictated by pain or anger or betrayal. We'd spend weekends exploring new places, trying out new hobbies, learning to laugh again in ways I thought I'd never laugh. It wasn't perfect. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but it was real, and it was ours. Every now and then, I'd hear about my ex-wife through mutual friends, people who still floated around on the edges of our lives, even if I'd long since cut most ties. From what they told me, things hadn't gone well for her. She gave birth to the child, a little girl, but she struggled, really struggled to cope. Being a single mom wasn't easy, especially when there was no one to lean on. I heard whispers about her turning to the bottle, drinking more than she should, trying to drown whatever guilt or regret she was carrying around. People said she looked different, tired, worn down, a shell of the woman I once knew. I won't lie and say that hearing those things didn't affect me. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, pity, and this strange sadness for what could have been. But the anger was gone, that burning rage that used to keep me up at night. It had faded into something else, something more like acceptance. She'd made her choices, and I'd made mine. We both messed up in different ways, and life had gone on, as it always does. I wished her well, silently, in my own way. I hoped she'd find her peace, find a way to move on, and be the mother that little girl needed. But that was her path to walk, and I had mine. And for the first time, I was okay with that. I was okay with the fact that we'd both gone our separate ways, that our mistakes had led us to different lives. Because in the end, those mistakes had brought me to Allison, to this second chance at happiness, and I wasn't going to waste it. Now, I look back on everything, not just the divorce, but the whole messy journey that got me here, and I can see it for what it was. A turning point. A chance to learn, to grow, to become someone better than I was before. And as I sit here, looking at the woman I love, planning a future full of possibilities, I realize that sometimes life breaks you down just so you can build yourself back up stronger. And I'm okay with that, because I know that whatever comes next, I can face it with Allison by my side. And that's all I need.